Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Lunch Break with the Rabbi today. We'll be continuing or starting learning ethics of our fathers as we do on Thursdays, as we explained in the past, that it is the custom that between the holidays of Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah we go through. That means during the summer months we read and study ethics of our fathers and the many reasons given for it. One of them was as we have longer days, so we have more time to study, as well as the temptations are a little stronger during the summer, so therefore ethics of our fathers keeps us in line. Today we are studying chapter 2 of Ethics of Our Fathers. Chapter 2 begins with the words Rabbi Omer, Rabbi, which refers to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Who was Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi? Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is well known to be the author and compiler of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the first documented written subject on the oral law. Until Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi came around, did not document the oral law. They only verbalized it and passed it down from generation to generation. Once Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi came along, he said people were forgetting the oral law. Therefore, he then documented it and was the first one to transcribe the different laws that the Talmudic rabbis discussed, and he then compiled what we know today as the 60 tractates of the Mishnah. Those 60 tractates later were then further extrapolated and expounded upon into thousands of pages of the Talmud, which then further became the basis of the code of Jewish law that we know it today. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was the founder and compiler of the Mishnah, he was born actually on the day that Rabbi Akiva was killed by the Romans. If you recall reading on the prayers of Yom Kippur, and we read it again on Tisha B'Av, we read about the terrible atrocity, and this actually has to do with tomorrow, the 20th of Sivan, which marks the day the terrible atrocities happened for Jewish people. But Rabbi Akiva was part of the 10 people who were killed by the Romans over a period of 200 years, that they selected 10 scholars, and they gave them a brutal, terrible, painful death. Rabbi Akiva's was such that they raked his skin with iron pitchforks, destroying him in the most painful way. Rabbi Yehuda was born on the day that Rabbi Akiva passed away. Rabbi Yehuda compiled the Mishnah 120 years post the destruction of the Second Temple, just to give you a little bit of a figure of when he was around. So he was about 120 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. That was the Rabbi Akiva. That was Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was the compiler of the Mishnah. Another interesting fact about Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, he lived a very long life. One of the things that the Mishnah talks about Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, in fact, we're going to mention it in chapter 4 or 5 of Ethics of Our Fathers, tells us about Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was the epitome of what the Torah tells us, a person who has greatness and scholarship all in one. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was probably the most amazing scholar of his time, but not only was he an amazing scholar, he was also very wealthy. And not only was he very wealthy, but he was very highly connected with the government at the time, known the Emperor Antoninus. They had a very special relationship, a relationship where they would meet each other at least once a week. There was a hidden channel where they would meet and how he would come. And the Talmud goes on to expound on that relationship, which was a very unique relationship, especially where Antoninus, who was the symbolism of the Roman emperor at the time, the superpower of the world, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was the leader of the Jewish people at the time, the superpower of the Jewish people, and they both collaborated and worked for the benefit of the Jewish people. Another interesting tidbit about Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi lived a very long life. Then before his passing, he promised his family that he will still visit them every single Friday night, but they have to set the table with challah and bread and set his place, and he will come there to visit them, and so on. The Talmud goes on to say that even after his passing, he visited them and he made kiddush for them until one time a neighbor saw what was going on, and then he stopped visiting, as that other scholars should not be able to be jealous, meaning that he was able to come in the form of an angel like Elijah the prophet, who was able to come even in a physical, spiritual, hybrid way. So that's Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and he is the author of this Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says as follows: And he asks the question, what is the most proper way for a person to choose for himself that is an honorable and beneficial for himself and for other people? What would be the best way to do things? Now you may ask, what do you mean, what's the best way to do things? The Torah tells us what's the best way to do things. Why does Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi have to ask a seemingly obvious question? And over here, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says, there's many different ways that you can do something. You have a servant and a child. They both work in the same home, in the same business. What's the difference between an employee to a child in the business? An employee clocks in at 9, finishes at 5. He can do a fabulous job. But at the end of the day, at 5 o'clock, he goes to home, he sleeps tight, nothing bothers him. The child may clock in at 10 o'clock, or may not show up as much as the employee does. But the difference is at night, the child knows that if that business doesn't go well, he's not getting any part of the pie. It makes a difference to him in what happens, and he continuously thinks about it. So though at the outset it may not look it, but on the inside, there's a deeper connection. Because of that, there's also another concept. The employee shows up to work to get a paycheck. The child shows up to work because it's his baby. It's something that they believe in out of a love and a passion. Over here, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi tells us, you can do what God tells you to do. You can follow all the commandments. You can do a wonderful job in all of it. But why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you're compelled to do it? You're afraid of hell, whatever it may be? Or are you doing it because it's a labor of love? Find a way that you can serve God, that it should be beautiful for you and beautiful for God. Find an avenue that you can incorporate in the commandments, that you should enjoy it, and it should also be enjoyable for God. Judaism is not here to make life difficult. Judaism is here that we should celebrate it, that we should enjoy it. We have to be able to find a method and a service to God that makes it enjoyable. This is step number 1 that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi tells us when we approach our service to God and in anything we do in life. We do a lot of things because we do it because we're compelled to do it and we find no happiness in doing it. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi reminds us that if you want to really do something passionately, you got to love what you're doing, then it's beautiful. Now, what does the word beautiful mean? In Hebrew, the word that he chooses here for tiferes is beautiful. If you recall, we discussed before, and Kabbalah explains that there are different extremes. There's chesed, which is the attribute of kindness. There's gvura, the attribute of distraction, strength, discipline. There are 2 extremes, the right and the left. Beauty is the synthesis of the 2 of them. Beauty is something tiferes, which is truth. When you're in extreme of either way, extreme discipline or extreme kindness, it's not going to last, because how long can you stay in extreme for? It fizzles out. But when you have the synthesis of the 2, it's consistent, it's true, and it will be enduring. Over here, Rabbi Yehuda reminds us, you want to be able to be so grounded that what you do should last and be consistent. It should be beautiful. Beautiful for yourself and beautiful for your maker. So he starts off with 3 pointers. Number 1, be careful with the most unimportant mitzvah as an important mitzvah, because we do not know the reward given for every mitzvah. The first thing he tells us is there's nothing unimportant in life. The reason why certain things go to the wayside, or why certain things we have less interest in, or why certain things we put less motivation to, is because we decide, that's nothing worth. We can never underestimate the benefit of what something is, of an action we do, of a mitzvah we do. How many times do we know that a mitzvah that may seemingly seem something trivial, but that changed a person's life? We never understand how this works, but certain people are triggered by different things. And sometimes the smallest act, whether it's saying hello, thank you, good morning, can transform an entire dynamic. So never underestimate something important, unimportant. View them equally the same. You'll find beauty in all of them. Number 2, compare the expense of a loss of money that a mitzvah might cause to the reward that you will receive by doing it. And compare the temporary physical gain from an Aveira with the loss that it will bring about. Over here, he tells us another great idea. Sometimes we do something, we bend and give into a craving because we want to, and say, oh, I can't hold myself back. It's just unbelievable. And we never realize what the repercussions may be. A person who's diabetic and sees this great piece of 7-layer cake and is so tempted to have it. Why? Because they never think about what may be the repercussion. And so too, the same thing is when we balance spiritual and physical. We say, well, there's a game of golf. How can I go to shul? I got so many other things to do. How can I spend time studying Torah? It's because we decided to put a value that I like this temporary gain over this eventual spiritual gain. And he says, remember, you can't equate the two. They're so different. Don't ever try to compare the spiritual gain with the physical gain. There's an interesting story about once there was this fellow who was imprisoned. This goes back in Lithuania, Moravia. And this fellow was imprisoned for a very long time, and they did not allow him to observe any level of Judaism. Until finally they said, you know what, we're going to allow you to go out of the prison to celebrate your Judaism one day. You have to pick one day that you would like to go, and you can do whatever you want. You're free, and then you have to come back. And he was torn. Which day should he choose? Should he choose Yom Kippur? It's the holiest day of the year, the time to be in the temple. Should he pick Sukkot so he can do more mitzvahs, he can eat in a sukkah, make a blessing on the lulav? Should he pick Pesach that he could do matzah? Which one should he do? So he sent a letter to a great scholar. His name was the Radvaz, Reb David ben Zimra. And the Radvaz wrote back to him as follows. And he says, the first opportunity that you have, you should do it. Because when a mitzvah comes to you, there's no such thing. Shabbos is more important than tefillin. The first opportunity you have to do a mitzvah, that's where you have to do it. Don't think about what I could gain, what I'm going to gain. You don't know what it is. When God gives you an opportunity to do a mitzvah, chance upon it, grab it, and do it. Don't let anything fall to the side. Then he says another thing. Then he continues at the last part of his mission, of the last third directive. And he says, think about 3 things, and you will never come to do a bad deed. Know that there's an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all your deeds are transcribed. With modern technology, Big Brother watching you, this mission is self-explained. Because we know that there's always somebody watching you. And over here, the Rabbi reminds us, Rabbi Yehuda reminds us, every single thing that we do in this world goes noticed. There's nothing that goes unnoticed. As we find today, people that did things from 25 years ago are coming back to haunt them. But he says even something deeper. Not just what you have to worry about, what you did, and that what's going to happen. But the words are da. You should know. Malamaila, what happens above in heaven, mimach is because of you. A Jew must remember that everything he does in life is because of the actions has a ripple effect in this world and in the spiritual world. There's nothing goes unnoticed. Anything that happens in this world has an effect, an everlasting and eternal effect. Every mitzvah we do is there for us without forever, and God forbid the transgressions we always have to work on, as King David says in Psalms, my sins are always there. What is it telling us is that the most important thing is the action that we do. The actions that we do are so important for those that see it and those that don't. But even for ourselves, we should know that every single action we do makes a difference. And with this, Maimonides teaches us that every person must view the world as it's an equal scale. And every action we do can bring to the world and change the world and bring salvation to the world. Everything we do, the first thing the Mishnah says, you should know, as Rabbi Yehuda tells us, who he transcribed the words of the Mishnah. And he tells us, if you know that everything you do has a ripple effect, you won't even come to the hands of a transgression. Meaning, not only will you not come to transgress, but you won't even come close to transgressing, because you will realize that what your actions are consequential. This is the lessons that we learned today when we talk of ethics of our fathers. This is just a glimpse into the ideas, into the sections of what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi put together of how we have to view the world, of how we view ourselves in relationship to the world, how we cultivate a relationship with God. Starting from realizing Tiferet, it has to be beautiful. It can't be to either extreme, it has to be a beautiful synthesis. Because as we know that Tiferet's beauty is truth, consistent, and will always be enduring. How do we get to such a truth? By being cognizant of the actions that we do, realizing that everything we do makes an effect and changes the world. And hopefully we will bring about the true change, an absolute change, a great change with the coming of Mashiach. Thank you for listening. Join us tomorrow again. Lunch break with the Rabbi tomorrow will be at 1 p.m. discussing this week's Torah reading. Looking forward to seeing you all. All the best.